Hi, I'm Marjan Neshat, and you're listening to The Art of Kindness.
Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to The Art of Kindness, where we have compassionate conversations with artists from all areas of the entertainment industry who are using their voice to spread joy and make this big spinning planet in the universe a better place to be. I'm Robert Peterpaul, and I'm so glad you're here. Hello, friend. Happy June. I feel like June is an act of kindness in itself because it leads us right into the sunny days of summer. And well, it doesn't hurt that it's also my birthday month. Hashtag Gemini. June brings us theater lovers the Tony Awards as well. And right now we are so blessed to have one of this year's kindest nominees in the studio. Today's guest is Marjan Neshat. Marjan emigrated to America from Iran as a child, leaving her homeland for safety and new opportunities amid difficult circumstances. Nowadays, you may recognize her from hit television shows like New Amsterdam, The Blacklist, and a recent stint on Netflix's The Night Agent, or iconic films like RoboCop, also known as RoboCop. She's also a stage veteran, most recently earning a Tony nomination for her stunning performance in English at the Atlantic Theater Company. Not a bad way to make a Broadway debut, just saying. The Pulitzer Prize-winning play English is a comedic and thought-provoking drama about Iranian adults preparing for the test of English as a foreign language exam. The play explores themes of language acquisition, identity, and empathy. Speaking of, Marjan has a lot of it. She opens up about the kindness it takes to portray complex characters, how empathy fuels her creative process, and the responsibility artists carry when telling stories that reflect real lives. We also dig into what kindness looks like in the entertainment industry today, especially during an awards season whirlwind, and how honesty, vulnerability, and heart can make all the difference. And you know what else can make all the difference? Sharing our show with a friend or leaving a 5-star review if you feel so inclined. But honestly, you just being here makes all the difference in my life. So please heat up a cup of tea, take a deep breath, and let's get into kindness. Without further ado, please welcome the magnificent Marjan Neshat.
I have to tell you, just the fact that your podcast is called The Art of Kindness, like when I was like, I'm really a little embarrassed that I'll probably start crying because I feel like kindness is so it's like the one sort of act that makes me feel really tender.
Oh,
So I was like, oh,
no, that makes
I
me
hope
so
I make
happy.
it.
I'm sure you will. Well, it's funny because our PR friend, shout out to Lisa, who's so amazing.
Yeah.
She literally emailed me and said her whole personality is kindness.
Oh,
And I
she's so
thought,
sweet.
okay, done. Also, is it Marjan
It's
or
Marjan.
Marjan?
Yeah.
Okay. I was listening to you on a couple interviews. You're so graceful with how people say it, but I heard you say it's really one pronunciation. So I'm trying to get that correct.
It's actually, to be fair, like the way my mom says my name is in Farsi, it's like different. But then if I say it, I have like the next hour is just like tweaking of it. And I'm like, no, I've been Marjan my whole life here. So let's just, that is what all my friends call me, or Margie, actually.
Margie. Oh, that's sweet. I
I
like that. I
know.
have a friend, Margie. Shout out to the Margies of the world.
Yeah.
But you have really created this reputation of kindness in this business, which I think is so special and makes me so excited that you're now getting all this recognition because we really need more kind leaders now more than ever around the world. And so before we kind of dive in, I would just love to know how you are at accepting compliments and all the love that's being thrown your way currently.
The unmet need part of me is like takes it in, but also there's like the part that's just like I feel like I have to do it in turn. So I'm like, no, but like that I
Yeah.
accept it. Like I can't lie. It's really nice, but at the same time, it is I like especially also the Iranian in me. It's like, no, but you, like you're so beautiful and you're so like
Yes.
it just feels like such a embarrassment of riches that you feel like you have to kind of pass it on to someone else.
I get that. They're like, "I love your shirt." You're like, "Oh, here you go. Do you want it?"
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tricky dance because we want them, it makes us feel so good, but then you kind of feel like you do have to say something about somebody else, and so it's kind of like riding that fine line, but
I
I
know.
really think there's always something kind to say about somebody.
It's
So
true. It's a complicated industry because you feel like there's a part of you, or like you learn early on that you have to be really confident and you have to go in and own it and you have to
yeah.
feel like you belong there and you deserve it. And sometimes that goes much more towards ego and you know that you leave these other parts behind. So it's a funny thing to navigate not being self-deprecating while also not taking all the air out of the room, you know?
Yeah, and it can be so insular until it's not, until you're in a rehearsal room and then there's a community or
Yeah.
even audition rooms there are, but not as much anymore with
Yeah.
self-tape, so
I
you
know.
kind of have to champion yourself and say yes and be confident, and then there comes a point where you have to remember who you are, which goes hand in hand with kindness, I think, but I don't wanna put a definition in your mouth. I would love to know what is your definition of kindness, and how do you think it's kind of changed over the years?
You know, I think in a way they are sort of linked to, in my mind, is also like the way that you love someone because I feel like on the larger sort of meta scale of it, it's like acceptance, right? It's just being able to see someone for what they are and making space for them. Um, I think I think sort of to be seen is the greatest act of like receiving the greatest act of kindness. So it lies in that world to me, but I also feel
Mm,
like to be loved also feels like being seen, you know?
yeah,
And I think that they go hand in hand in so many ways. Just to I don't know, to look at someone and go, "Okay, I see you."
mm. Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, it applies to acting as well because you can't really have a successful scene if you're not seeing or listening to your scene partner.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
you've talked about too doing a one woman show. The scene
Oh my god.
partner is your audience, so you always kind of have to be listening, even when you have I don't even know how many lines you had in your head. I'm sure like 80 pages of dialogue or something.
Well, that was the thing is like I was like as an actor and even as a person, I think sort of my biggest skill is being able to be present and listen.
Mm.
And all through the rehearsals for that show, I was like, the time to listen didn't exist. It's like I was in conversation with myself, and I was like, "How do you do this?" It's so crazy.
Yeah, hats off to that. And before we kind of get into your career, and I also want to ask you more about the skill of listening because you're a fantastic acting teacher. So I'm trying not to geek
Uh,
out too much, but I probably will. Is there an act of kindness that you feel like really changed your trajectory and put you on the path you're on? There's one that kind of struck me in learning more about your story, but I would love to hear what your gut reaction is.
you know, the truth of it, I don't know how much people talk about this, but when I was really young, I, I mean, this is tangentially related to the arts, but I saw a therapist who basically I was like, you know, I graduated from drama school. I don't have a lot of money. Like I didn't want to go on anyway. So he saw me for many sessions a week for many years for like $15 a session. And I truly believe that
Oh,
his belief in me, like it was one of the greatest act of kindness for someone who's like, I see you and I think I can help you.
mm,
And I'm just gonna do it, even though he was a very like, you know, fancy, like I would have never been able to afford to get that help in that way.
yeah.
And I feel like there was a he just I don't know. I still to this day I'm like I don't know why I got lucky in that way, but it's like a singular act of kindness that he throughout
Mm,
the years like just was there for me without ever like sometimes you're like, oh, is there gonna, but it was like nothing weird. He just
Yeah,
really,
nothing
truly
reciprocal.
cared for me in a way that made me feel, I think, like there was something, like it made me feel worthwhile to have someone who had
Mm,
no, like he didn't have to.
yeah.
And it really changed my life in many ways. And also I think one of the best teachers I think we have in America is this man named Ron Manlu. He was like, I think everyone needs someone who is like who they admire or look up to, who opens the door and goes, "Hey, come in. Like you deserve to be here." And I
Yeah.
feel like I looked up to him so much, and I feel like in all of my classes with him and teachings with him, he's shown me the way in which that changes people's lives. And now he started this like mentorship program with this actor center who I'm a member of, and I feel like this need to kind of take a younger generation and go, you know what, there's a whole long lineage and history of this, and like you should know about it, but also come into the room.
Yeah, I
It's
think that's
pretty,
so beautiful. I mean,
yeah,
both of those examples are so beautiful because really kindness, I think, in a sense, is giving someone your time. And time is kind of the greatest gift you can give somebody, right? Spending time with each other, which is why I'm so grateful you're here with me for a little bit.
thank you. There was like the beginning quote of I think Zadie Smith's on Beauty, like one of her inscriptions was like, "Thank you to my husband who taught me time is how you spend your love." And I always thought that was
Mm.
so beautiful.
That's really beautiful. I always think of too Oprah saying time is the greatest gift you can give somebody
Yeah.
in the opening of her podcast. So I've
Yeah.
stolen that quite a bit. I always try and attribute it to Oprah. But, you know, speaking of kind of the second act you mentioned, that validation and sort of validating somebody's time on this earth, I think validation can be a dirty word for some people in a sense.
Sure.
But I think it's so important because as artists, we can get so in our head. We can have imposter syndrome at any level with
Yeah.
all the different kinds
So
of people
true.
I speak with. And so you've had kind of the ultimate validation on Broadway, which is your Tony nomination. I buried the lead. Congratulations.
Thank you. It doesn't cease to be kind of like surreal and also just like it's so
Yeah.
like there's
And
no
it's
word. I just every once in a while I'm like, I can't believe this happened.
well, I mean, how are you feeling as we kind of near the big day? I know you were nominated for other things and also have already won things for this performance in English, which I'm
Yeah.
so sad I missed, but
Oh.
I did do a deep dive before we were talking today. So, yeah, can you just kind of encapsulate your feelings today in this moment?
I mean, you know, um, people say this, but in a way, for our play, that was just, it was like small and nuanced and delicate, not super showy, it didn't have a long run. The way that the world feels like it embraced it and put its arms around it, the fact,
Hmm.
really, like the way that the world seemed affected by it was the most moving, meaningful thing. And then to have had 5 Tony nominations for that show is so. That's the win. I mean, like, I feel like I have to forever think about that as like that not only just being, it's like we all dream of being accepted by this community. When you devote your life to theater, like it's awards are awards, and it's really hard to decide like who's the best. There is like no number,
Yeah.
but just to the acknowledgement, I can't deny, has meant the world to me.
Mm. And every nominee is the best to somebody. It comes down
Of
to a million
course.
different factors. So it is the nomination is the win. I
Yeah.
personally think. I mean, being on Broadway is one win, and then this is a whole other level. And I kind of think, from what I know about English, this play is really the perfect example, I think, of arts and action because it seems to really not preach at people, but sort of invite them in with this beautiful story. And then, I mean, there was this ending I heard about that was so cool, and I wish I experienced, but people leave the theater totally different. And even if it's for just that hour or two or that day or that week, or it changes them for their lifetime, it's what we need more of in this world, right?
It's so true. I mean, I just keep thinking like we are living, actually, I mean, it's so amazing that you're doing this podcast because I don't
Thank
know
you.
what else is more important at a time when it feels like everything is going the other way, just to give
Mm,
people your time or just to promote dignity and kindness feels like the most radical act.
Oh, thank you. And well, I'm fortunate to work with an organization called kindness.org, and they actually study kindness from a scientific standpoint. So there is science behind all of these things we talk about, from kindness is contagious that you see on a home goods pillow to, why smiling at somebody else is also contagious to why, X, Y, and Z boosts your mental health. So they're actually facts that it's good for you as well as the person receiving it. And I think there's really no reason not to be kind, but it does take a lot of work. And artists are incredibly vulnerable, which I think is half the work maybe to getting there. I don't know about you, but I think just saying hi to a stranger, it's vulnerable. It's like so simple, but it's vulnerable. And then maybe you'll get a scene of that and you sort of play it differently when in reality it's like, no, saying hi to somebody is a vulnerable thing when it's a stranger.
It's so
So
true.
yeah, I think you're right on to call it radical. Not me, but kindness in this time. And another radical thing, and these things can be tricky, right? Because I'm sure it comes with its own crown to bear, but you're the first Iranian actress to be nominated in the category. You already won the Drama Desk, which is huge,
Yeah.
by the way, obviously. You're nominated for a Drama League award. I mean, the list goes on. How does that aspect of it feel? Can you put that into words?
Me and Tala both are for the first Iranian Americans. It feels I know how profoundly lucky I am to get to pursue my dreams, and I know that it's a very like small like chance that I'm here and not on the streets of Iran. And
Hmm.
so I don't take that lightly because I feel like I'm it both feels kind of the idea that my name would be next to something that's like history change, like history in the making feels like that. I never thought about that. Like I never had ambitions to change the world. I had ambitions to
Hmm.
like just pursue doggedly how to live and like how to show that. And so it just feels like kind of a tremendous thing that's happened, but I also know part of that is like a profound you know, opportunity and freedom, and I don't take that lightly,
Hmm.
you know?
That's beautiful. You know, I don't know if you feel this way. My water bottle feels the same. It just cracked. But maybe I blacked out during researching you. But there was this story I've heard you tell about the beginning of your journey, and I think you're sort of a living, breathing example of the power of kindness because you mentioned, and I'm not probably going to give this person the correct title, but there was an officer that looked your mother in the eyes
Yeah,
and sort of, I think that was a kindness that the way he sort of like handled that moment. And I
yeah.
just think that's so cool that if that kindness hadn't happened, if you had had a different officer, I don't know,
It's so
what
true.
your journey would have been.
I mean, I feel like if we were going to the American embassy from Iran now, they'd be like, "Get out!" Like, they're this is so unlikely because it's not in the culture. It's not like I feel like we're not breeding that
Mm,
in those positions, right?
yeah.
And I think that it's true. I think that that man saw my mother and saw these two girls and was like, understood, I know you're not just going for a visit, but
Mm,
okay, I can, and so I will. And that changed the course of our lives
yeah.
entirely.
I mean, I get the goosebumps, when I was listening to you tell that story. And I think you make jokes about your family saying, "Oh, we fought to come to America, and you're not going to be a doctor. You're not going to be, X, Y, and Z." And now you have Tony validating Antoinette, validating your career. Has that changed the way, more importantly, you feel about yourself as an artist? Has that made you treat yourself kinder? Do you think?
I think I do actually think so. In that, I feel like I love working and I always feel more myself. But there's so many you go through such dry spells and you go through so much rejection. And I feel like for a long time I would just constantly be like, I should do something. Like I got to do something with my life. And
Yeah.
I could never think of what that would be. And I didn't want to stop and be bitter. Like there's like this
Mm,
idea of the person, like you meet them at a party and they're like, "Oh, you do that." Like I almost did that, but then like there's like the
yeah.
feeling that you feel like they're just dragged down by their own regrets.
Mm.
And I never wanted to be a bitter person. And so I just like could never, I just couldn't, I just was like, I'm not yet. And so
Yes.
now with all these things, I have to say that I feel like I don't, there's definitely times where I'm like, oh, I want to work or why didn't I get this? But I don't think that I should look to something else. I'm like, no, this is my way in the world. This is what I'm supposed to do. And
Yeah.
there's a real solace in that.
Yeah, that's so relatable. It reminds me of the song Glory Days by Bruce Springsteen. Just that you come
Yeah.
across this person from high school that sort of had everything and maybe didn't follow their passion and they're in the same place and they just want to live in the past. And that to me also feels like something I don't want to be in later in life. And so it's interesting that you've like kind of named that as a driving force. I think a lot of people can relate to that. And now you're in this Tony season whirlwind. How have you been treating yourself with kindness right now? Because I know you're doing interview after, ribbon cutting. I don't even know, but
Yeah.
that's a lot.
You know, I I don't know. I don't know how kind I've been to mostly I'm like, what do I wear?
Well, because you're famous for asking, I think, other people how their day has been, how they're doing, what they do in the morning when they wake up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm very curious about what you do to kind of
Yeah.
keep yourself centered.
I do meditate. I feel like
Okay.
that really was life-changing for me learning how to do that. And I've also I think what I have allowed myself, which is not always the my go-to, is I've let people help me. Like like even for, some of the stuff, like calling a friend and being like, I need to borrow shoes, or can you please just like come up with one outfit for me and
Yeah.
allowing them to give me that kindness and just being like, thank you, instead of being like, well, I have to do something to make up for it for you. Like, just to
Yeah.
accept it and go, you actually care about me and you want, like, trusting that this makes you happy to be able to do it for me and just saying thank you instead of, my Iranian being like, no, no, but I should buy you something or I
I
should
know.
come to your house and cook you a meal because you did
Yeah.
this for me. And I don't
Yeah.
have time right now. And so I think probably the kindest thing I've done is just to be like, accept it. Just say
Mm.
yes and say thank you. And in time, hopefully you can return the favor, but not to kind of scramble to do it right away.
Huh. The Italian in me is very similar in that it's hard for me to let other people help me, but there is research too that shows that letting others help you is good for you, it's good for them. And I wonder if too, because we're in an industry where we're used to having to let others help us to literally put on the show. Like you need to have someone buttoning up your quick change
Yeah, totally.
shirt that and everyone else puts their life on hold so you can follow this career. So then you sort of don't want other people to have to help you because they've already done this thing of helping you follow your passion. So maybe that's part of it too. But I don't know. I could just be spitballing here. I I wonder, like speaking of this community in this Tony season time, have you met any Broadway legends or anybody you really look up to, a fellow nominee that you found to be utterly kind?
Oh my God. I feel actually like I feel sort of starstruck by everyone I meet. Like Jessica Hecht came up to me at the Tony
Oh
luncheon and
yeah.
she was like, I saw your show and I just wanted to tell you I got in for like the penultimate performance. And she was just so gracious and so
Mm.
kind, and like Cara Young, who is like such a pro and she does this all of like every event I see her, she's like hugs me and like she's just like so there's like a generosity of spirit, all around the room. I have to say, actually, also, like knowing that for so long in this industry, you're going into rooms being like, I'm somebody, I swear. Like there was like this like idea of having to prove it. And I
Yeah.
went to for like the Tony press day and everyone was so nice. And they were like, we're so happy for you. And I was like, oh my God. Like it was just like such a dream experience to just have everyone be like, not only accepting, but just like rooting for you in this
Mm.
way. And I'm sure they're making everyone feel that way, even though on some degree, I guess we're in competition with each other, but it didn't feel that way. It just felt like a
Yeah.
very warm sort of like, this is the community, and the community is like standing by all the people in this room. And it felt really warm and
Mm.
beautiful.
That is really beautiful. And
Yeah.
and it also sounds warm. You know, It's funny because even though I didn't get to see your beautiful show, I was listening to you on my friend Alan's podcast.
Oh,
Shout out to the
I
theater
love
podcast.
Ellen.
I know it was such a fantastic interview and was trying not to steal his questions, but I was on the way to bring my mom to chemotherapy. And when I got there, I met a new nurse, and she was someone from another country who thought she barely spoke English. She acted sort of a little embarrassed about it, didn't really want to speak. But she did fool me whenever she did speak. I was like, I think you probably know more of this like very complicated, silly language than you think. And because of your journey and listening to you, I really just wanted to say to her, the fact that you were here and working this job and also in school and a mother and learned all these languages, you are just brilliant. And it kind of made me wonder, like, how do you think people in a native country can kindly embrace those coming here without it seeming, I don't know, patronizing or unkind? Because I think we think we're being kind sometimes, but that doesn't mean someone receives it that way.
Totally. I think that partly it's truly in a way like what we were talking about. It's like listening to someone is just not making assumptions that they are different from you and that they want something else, or it's like, oh, they're othered, and I think that's part of the what I loved about the play so much. And I love Sanaz Toossi is a truly she's a gift to all of us. And I think that part of what she managed to do is just to put, full-fledged complicated characters on stage. And she because when they were most themselves, they were speaking English. I think it gave the audience the chance to be like, oh, normally we see them in these like exotified ways or in these like othered ways. And I think a lot of the responses I heard from the audience was like, oh, I just didn't, it's like making that connection that we have way more in common than we have differences. And so I
Mm,
think it's looking for that, like when you find, it's like you see on the subway and like you see someone who looks so different from you, and then someone comes on and like screams something and you look at that person and you both laugh because you both are like, oh my God,
yeah.
what's gonna happen? But and like that there's no way that you would necessarily be, sharing something, but you do because
Yeah.
we are more alike. And I think that part of it is just that, is just, or it's like asking questions without assumption.
Mm,
It's not asking a question being like, "Oh, well, you're obviously different from me, so what do you eat?" It's just like, "Oh, what do you eat? What do you like
yeah.
to do?" And assuming that looking for what is common as much as looking for what is different, but not with
Mm.
judgment.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I think too, the ironic thing for me at least is that we've all felt what it feels like to be othered in different degrees, obviously. As much as it divides us, it also unites us. And so it always blows my mind. And I know it's more complicated than that when people get tripped up in sort of othering others because in their life they probably felt othered in a different way. Now, I take a shot every time I say othered, you know. And I love that English as a story sort of encouraged empathy. You mentioned audience reactions. I'm wondering, did you have one in particular that was very impactful for you, as you went to the stage door or even now just talking about it?
There were so many. One night, my friend had been sitting next to this, I think, South Asian man who had flown in from Cleveland with his son, and I think was like used to bringing his kid to see a musical every now and then for like culture. Um, but I think she was like by the end of this play, like she heard him mention, it's like, oh, I don't know why I said English, whatever. We'll give it a go. It was on 42nd Street. And she's like, by the end of this play, like it was like he was just like zipped open, and he turned to his son and was like, I didn't think I'd ever see myself up there. Like my story,
Mm,
this thing of language, having he'd also had to take the TOEFL before come, that he didn't expect to go to Broadway to see that. So there's like
yeah.
that range. And then one day this woman came with her two daughters, and she was like, I was a teacher in Iran, and she was like, I flew in from Chicago when I read about this, and she was like, I can't tell you what you've given me. And the girls were crying and they're like, you made us understand our mom in a way that like she tried to explain. And I was like, oh my God, like it's just so moving, the idea of how art can like just
Yeah.
affect us in so many different ways, in ways that we
Mm,
don't expect. And like that's the dream. It's the dream to like have the air change and for people to leave just a little different or a little bit more tender or just a little bit more like, I don't know, available to other people.
Mm. And well, what about your family's reactions? I'm wondering how how was that?
I mean, so my niece is half Iranian, half kind of Jewish American, and like this little beautiful like 16-year-old just like would not stop weeping. And she was like in Omid's monologue about like I've always felt like half a thing. She was just like the idea of seeing that, or like for my mom to be like seeing music that she grew up with, which is so not a part of this culture, like just being like Haide being front and center and like on an American stage. Like I think it just makes people feel like part of the culture, versus we know about your culture, but you'll never know about ours.
Yeah. Did you get to see your mom in the audience? Like I know on Broadway you really can see the audience. I don't know where she was sitting, but I imagine that she probably had that experience of just beaming with pride for, obviously you're her daughter, but the reason you just stated, just that
I,
character center stage.
I didn't see her in the audience, but she was sitting with my husband and my 12-year-old son, who at the end of this play, he'd seen it when he was 9, and it's the only play of mine that he's seen. And I think he liked the funny parts and he liked the revolving set. But this time around, they said my husband's like he started bawling so hard at the end of this play. Like all the women
Oh.
next to him are like, and like he's like he made the whole row cry. And I think he was so he like I think viscerally understood it in such a different way. And then my mom sitting next to her grandson watching, like the whole thing was like opening night was one of the best opening nights I've ever had, but also really emotional. Like the
Mm,
even the
that
kindness
sounds
of
like
my
it.
son to like he was like, "Mom," he's not actually a theater kid and he's quite sensitive, and so he distances himself from things that are really like make him too emotional. But he's just like crying and
Yeah.
he's like, "It was so good. It was so good." And I felt like
Oh.
there was such forgiveness for all the absences, like in that taking in of it, that I just
Mm.
like it was really emotional.
Well, that's no, it sounds like it. It makes me wonder too. I was going to ask you this. What has being a mom taught you about kindness? From the journey you had with your own mom up until now becoming a mom. I feel like mothers are some of the most empathetic, selfless people out there. So, do you have any thoughts to share on that?
It's been I think it's been the like truly the biggest lesson in humanity of my life, because there's I mean, you fail every day. Like like you try, but of course it's just like you say the wrong and I feel like we assume a
Sounds
lot
like
about
acting, trying to be an
yeah,
actor.
yeah, it's true. Um it I think it's really interesting. I feel like there was so much in my own life that I always attested to, like, "Oh, well, I'm like this because, like, this terrible thing happened to me when I was young," or
Mm,
that my dad was, like, really like this. And then you see I'm not raising my kid necessarily the way I was raised or those experiences, and then you see, like, actually their sensitivities or their proclivities are their own, and you have to relearn this idea like, really kind of what it is to be human and how to grow and how like one day like you lose it and you yell and they still come back
mm,
with kindness like I feel like it's like of course all kids like push buttons and do all that, but they're so quick to want to have you back in a way, and so
mm.
it's really like it has stretched my understanding of what it is to love, like
Oh,
profoundly.
wow.
I was like, this really, you could do nothing where I wouldn't. Even though I'm like the other, like even though I have moments where I'm like, oh my God, I'm a
Yeah.
terrible mother. I just like
Oh.
lost my shit. But, but, but like, unlike I think having a fight with a friend or boyfriend, you're just like, it's like there's such an inside part of you that goes like, no, but they didn't ask to be born, and so you have to like
Yeah.
you have to reset, you have to restore this because that's who you're making, someone that you want to be able to go out into the world and like be a good person and be kind,
Mm,
you know.
yeah.
So
Well, it sounds like your son is very lucky to have you.
I'm lucky to have him. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it must too really sort of check you in this industry where there's just something so much more important now than your dream. Like your child, I imagine, becomes your new dream. So do you feel like it makes it a little bit easier to shed any of like the career heartbreak because
More
you're like,
so,
I
I
go
think
home to
it
my
made
son.
me a better actor in a lot of ways because I
Mm,
think it not only did I expand like as a human, but also I do think what ultimately is important or understanding like what I need to model for this person. It like it gave me a lot of perspective in terms of like what I'm trying to put in the world,
mm,
you know? Like I feel like it also just it's interesting. It's like it before I feel like everything was not just in someone else's hand, but it's like someone letting you in. But like now I have a whole world that is just like mine and not touchable. And so there is like
yeah.
this, there is a, I don't know, there is like a whole other life happening all at the same time,
Yeah. And
which
that's a
gives
good
you
reminder
something.
too
Yeah.
about intention, even with acting. Like, what is your intention before you film your self tape? Just something really specific to hold on to there. Like,
Yeah.
what am I actually trying to do besides say these lines that don't make sense for this pizza commercial? Anyway, sorry, getting too specific. But I do want to touch on your other children, your students, because you are a teacher at the new school in New York. I imagine that they're probably freaking out that their teacher now has a Tony nomination. That must be so wild for them.
They wrote me a really nice card.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was, it's like we touch things through, I've touched things through other people, it's like 5 degrees or 2 degrees. And a lot of them are actually like international students at the new school. So I think also coming to see the play and being like, oh,
Mm,
I speak with an accent and like it's like that these like people are being seen. I think, I do think in many ways as a teacher, I've often felt like I love I love process and I love rehearsal. And I'm part of this company called the Actor Center, which is like, when I got in, my mentors were Lynn Cohen, and she was still showing up at 82 doing Shakespeare monologues because she like
mm.
wanted to grow. And that's like a ethos that's very close to my heart. And but I was like, "Oh, well, maybe I would teach when I'm older." Like, I always thought, like, when they all seemed so much more knowledgeable and, had so much more gravitas, and it kind of fell into my lap earlier.
Mm.
And so for so long, I'd always walk into the room as a total imposter and be like, "Well, I only figured out by trying to put it in my body," and then be like, "What would I do? Or what do I?" But I think as time has gone on, I think I've realized, like, I'm probably never gonna be the teacher that necessarily I had, who I was scared of and was like, "They have all the answers." But I
Mhm,
think what I have is, like, I see them. And maybe because I
mm.
relate to them more as an actor, I'm like, "Oh, I see. You're terrified of this, and so you keep doing this, and I think you
Yeah.
don't have to do that." And then they're like, "That is," like, so I think it is
It's magic.
yeah, I think probably it's how I've dealt with my imposter syndrome is just to be like,
Mhm.
well, there are certain things that I know or certain things that I'm good at, and I'm just gonna focus on that and not not the idea of
Yeah.
what it is to be like this grand dam teacher,
That's so helpful. And I think too, even the opposite helps me sometimes, wherein there are so many things I don't know. So why am I choosing to believe these mean thoughts in my head about myself
Yeah.
as facts? Because I actually don't know a lot. So you know what? That's not true either. I'm just gonna let that go. So I think both ways are awesome ways to kind of like break out of imposter syndrome. And I think it's amazing that you're in this role model teacher position. I mean, I even when I was going to acting school, can remember so vividly at like these major acting schools in the city, there'd be always international students coming from all over the world to study acting in New York. And I was always so like it always hurt my heart when teachers would try and like beat the accent out of somebody or tell them they had to present a certain way to work in this industry. And there's been a shift over the years, obviously, but
Yeah,
it
totally.
just makes me so happy now that there are plays like English where people can just feel like they can do their art and not have to, have the other weird things get in the way. But we talked about listening, which is obviously an invaluable skill just in life, and one we need more of in the world. Can you share ways you've seen students get better as listeners and become more present in scenes? I don't know if you have any hacks for kind of like teaching that, but I think it relates to kindness immensely.
I mean, I many, many years ago did this master class, and one day Phil Hoffman came to teach it, and he's like, "You got to be really honest with yourself. Like when you're on stage, are you dreaming of being in the bar afterwards and having everyone tell you how great you are?
Hmm.
Or do you want to be on stage lugging really heavy suitcases up your brain?" Because like that's what it is. Like you have to be constantly thinking. And so I
Hmm.
think that what I try and pinpoint to them, it's like your response, like what was your thought before you respond? Like what is the thing that you're responding to? And so sometimes I'll
Hmm.
ask them to like actually have to like what are you weighing? Because often we're never saying what we mean. We're thinking something or
Yeah.
figuring out how to say something else to either move our life forward or to protect that person. And like your characters are as intelligent and complicated as you. And you, like I know when you're listening to me are like weighing all the things that you think, So I'm like, you have
Yeah.
to give that to your character. So then like I try a lot to be like, what is it that you're actually thinking? And then what is it you say? And it kind of forces them to have to engage, versus like, oh, I planned this whole thing and I'm just going to present it to you. I'm like, but what what are like the things in between this thing that you planned? Like, what's the thought?
Mm. And yeah,
The
that
heavy
takes a lot of
suitcase.
character work too, because thinking is so specific to a person. Some people maybe are just only thinking about what they can say next that may be related to like the first part of what someone said, but doesn't actually relate in the long run. Other people maybe have like ADHD. I mean, there's like a lot of very dynamic ways to be a thinker. And I think one thing you've talked about that has been an asset in your acting, and I think this is so cool, but you've said that being thin skinned is positive. And it's like we always hear, I know growing up, I always heard, grow a thick skin. Stop being such a baby. Don't be thin
What
skin.
I
But
heard my whole life.
yeah, it was the worst. But now that is that something you talk about with your students as embracing? I mean, I think that's so beautiful.
I do. I mean, I feel like it's like everyone has their own sort of superpower, like to a certain extent, And I'm like,
Hmm.
you have to figure out what yours is. Like you have to figure out what you love and what you relate to, and you have to put it in the world. And I was like, for me, I was always like made to sort of feel embarrassed that like, oh, she'll probably like this will make her sad, or she'll be like cry, or like there's like there was that element of being like, you gotta toughen up. And I think I realized through work and through like continually like doing this that actually being sensitive to the world allowed the work to happen more fluidly. Like I wasn't trying to muscle a feeling or trying to, produce some kind of like emotional effect. Like I could
Hmm.
actually, if I really, the best of myself can be moved by the world. And that's like, I'm generally like a hypersensitive person, but also like I have other students where I'm like, that's clearly not your thing. So what is your
Yeah.
thing that like, but yeah, to just not be essentially, I think so much of it is like really if you're gonna present a human being, you kind of have to figure out who you are as a human being
Yeah.
and like how you're like them and how you're different. I say that a lot to my
Hmm.
students. It's like, how are you like them and how are you different? And like it's important to figure that out because
Hmm.
if I'm paying someone who is like really thick skinned, then I have to go to someplace else to kind of create that.
Yeah.
So it's like you figure out what you can use in yourself and then you have to like see what you have to steal from someone
How did
else.
you figure that out? I mean, was it the $15 therapist that we love? Like, how did you figure out who you are? Because I think a lot of listeners actually struggle with that, like sort of finding out who they are and then doing it on purpose, to quote Dolly Parton.
You know, it's like working 9 to 5.
Yeah, there we go. The other spiritual leader of
Um,
America, Miss
I
Dolly.
mean, I don't think it's done, I don't think we ever get there, but I think it's just, it's like going into rooms and like leaving and being like, oh, I was so fake. Like, why did I feel like I had to like
Hmm.
act so much more energized than I feel like just like understanding like what I think, I guess, if I was to say, not that I would ever have a formula, but I think my way towards that has been what consistently lights me up.
Mm.
Like what do I love? This is what I tell my kid all the time. I'm like, I don't you have to find what you love and put it in the world. And like when you're in conversation with someone who is like talking about their subject, they're always more themselves,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
you present like your whole energy is so present and so I that part of you, like obviously that is an authentic part of you or an authentic
I
pillar that's
guess.
like that like I can't imagine that like you get off this and be like, well, I'm fucking like
You don't
that
wanna
you're
see what signs I have hanging up around my room, and they all say F no, yeah. Yeah, it's
hate these guests. They're so dumb. you know
No, no. Well, I mean, podcasting has been such a great way to try and like hone the art of listening. I mean, I'm always like you. I think you've said that you're very curious about people. I just love learning about people, but also it's really special to just know you have a time carved out where you have like you're supposed to be listening each day. And I think that could be something maybe a lot of us try and practice, and you're never perfect at it because many things happen throughout your day, spoiler alert, and sometimes you're just caught up in your own stuff. But I love that you kind of shared your own little formula there. And I wonder if you have any stories you can share. I don't know why the audition room specifically comes to mind, but of when you feel like what you just described, you weren't really being yourself and you found a way to snap into it. Because that's what trips up young artists the most. I mean, I speak from experience, is like just getting in your own way.
I mean it's been so long since we go into audition rooms. I kind of wish I
Yeah.
could go into them now, like with sort of the last 4 years of work under my belt. And
Yes.
I imagine actually the thing that would be different is that I would maybe, you know, just acknowledge more that I'm a person and you're a person. Like
Yeah.
that you don't have all the keys to the kingdom and I'm like just this like little person hoping that you'll like me, but a little bit going and being like, this is what's interesting to me and like what like just
Mm,
to have it be more human.
yeah.
And I feel like when I was young, there's like this idea that being liked was really important, that you have to
Mm,
be liked to be, given the thing. And so sometimes like you're acting in a way it's like a perceived idea of what it is to be nice or what it is to be liked. And it's
yeah.
not actually, it doesn't like necessarily match. I mean, there are some people who are, I think, really bubbly and really, but I feel like that only works for the people who are genuinely like that. I think I
Yeah.
am generally a little bit more quiet and shy and introspective and, like interior. And so when
Yeah.
I try and go and be like the most extroverted person at the party, it's always like, that's just not gonna work out.
It doesn't feel right to. No, I
Yeah.
think that like there's
I
something for
stop.
everybody, and trying to find your authentic self and again, do it on purpose, to quote Dolly, is that's what I do have hanging up in my room. I have like a little Dolly Parton over there, is incredibly important. You know, it makes me curious as a sensitive person, which I can relate to, I think a lot of artists can. How do you handle these moments of unkindness, especially with the level you're now at in your career? Have you found a way to match these like difficult moments with kindness, or does it kind of shut you down? Because I know those things used to shut me down.
It shut me down a lot. And I mean, believe me, I've cried like buckets of tears over just the smallest and also sometimes it's perspective, like the smallest thing that I perceived to be against me and
Mm,
took it personally, and probably that person was also just trying to figure out how to get through the room. I like
yeah,
something recently had like really gotten under my skin. I'm very lucky that I have at this point in my life like profoundly good friends who I think I really rely on, and they are the cornerstone of my sort of existence. And I was talking to a friend of mine about it, and I was like, "I don't know, I felt like this was," and she was like, "You know what? Just go in and be, like, extra nice to them. Like, just, like, instead of trying to rehash this, just, like, treat it with radical kindness." And I was like, "Yeah." And, like, I feel like when I did, I was like, "Oh, I feel bad." Like, instead of assuming that person,
yeah,
I don't know, like, has the worst intentions towards me, like, I was like, "I'm just gonna be really nice." And it did change, because I think sometimes I mean, sometimes people are mean, but sometimes people seem mean because they're also just uncomfortable, like don't know how to
mm,
deal. And,
yeah,
so I feel like sometimes, and I think that sometimes you do need to go home and like cry into your pillow a little bit, like, nurse your wounds, and then go, "Okay, well, what am I gonna do about it?" Am I gonna just
Yeah.
never go into these rooms again? Like, no, you have to.
Hmm.
So it's like choosing how to
Yeah. Assuming the best intention.
I mean, I feel like
That's
all of
a
this and even kindness, like, I feel it is and listening, it's like a or being present, it actually is something you have to practice.
hmm. Yeah.
That it's not like
Yeah, which is
there's
so hard in today's world where every second that you have in downtime, you pick up your phone, and you kind of suck into that and self-medicate with whatever. And so I
self-medicate
think it
the
takes
most
even
anxiety producing thing.
yes, exactly. And I think that's and what do we go on? We go on social media, which is like the comparison game, and then comparison is the thief of joy, they say. So it's sort of like wild that that's what we turn to, and I mean, the fact that anybody can be present now is truly a feat, I think. Because, I mean, being bored, I think, is underrated.
I totally agree. I actually said this to my kid
Yeah.
a lot, like, I have friends and also, like, family whose kids are, like, truly overbooked, and I just don't have like, my kid isn't sporty, and he doesn't have, like, a million activities, and a lot of times you'll be like, "I'm bored," and I'm like, "Good. Good, be bored and see what
Yeah.
happens." Like, eventually, you'll figure something out.
Yeah, that's my same response to when I hear people say they're bored now, because I think about being a kid and I don't remember being bored. I'm sure I was, but whatever happened when I was bored was then my cousins and I would, run over to my grandma's cupboard, steal all her paper plates and make puppets out of them. And then, they weren't very happy that they had no more paper plates. But, you find a way to then entertain yourself after kind of like sitting with it for a while. And I don't know, it's just like a healthier way to live in my opinion, but,
Totally.
you're
I
the
feel yeah. It feels like our
oh, yeah,
lives
no,
are so
sorry.
much more wholesome.
Yeah,
There's something so
exactly.
beautiful about, like, just, like, making like, I think my father-in-law was saying, like, they'd go out and, like, they made a little camera. Like, they just didn't have anything to do, so they, like, made shit up. I was like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, do that."
I know, yeah, my friend and I, like, ran down to the dead end, and we made a path for everybody through the woods so the 2 roads connected, and I think the town didn't like that either, but you know what? It was a great way to spend our time, or making little movies on your own, and that's a way to find who you are earlier on, is if you kinda let yourself be bored and then you see what actually does light you up, because you can't really light up if you don't have the darkness, I guess, to continue the metaphor. You know, but you're the teacher here, and in English, again, you play a teacher, and I just wonder too, what that made you feel like in regards to your philosophy of teaching or the way you interact with students? Did then playing a teacher on a stage sort of change that at all?
I mean, I think it helped. I think playing a tea I mean, I think having had some experience as a teacher helped kind of it helped sort of the outside element of walking in and having to have, like, presence or, look at
Hmm.
the whole class. But I feel like this teacher, it was so I still had to rely so much more on the qualities of, she's like a woman with so much longing and unmet need and someone who is, like, losing touch with what she used to identify with. So, like, I feel like the veneer of it was
Hmm.
this. And I did actually when we moved it to Broadway, one of the things that our director is, like, brilliant and so astute was like, she really let's work on making her the best teacher. And part
Hmm.
of that, I think, is figuring out how, each student learns. And I think I didn't always succeed at that, like, I had, like, one sort of thing that I was offering, and it took me a long time to figure as in that role being like, "That doesn't work for everyone," and that it's
Hmm.
on me that I couldn't adjust per student, and it
Yeah.
resulted in a lot of the conflict of the play, and so, in some ways, I think she was a really, mm, you know, a good teacher in that she gave a lot of her time and enthusiasm, and she believed in all of them, but also she couldn't adjust when someone was like, "Your way isn't helping me." But at the
Hmm.
same time, it was like her way that got the student who thought they were failing to succeed. So it's like it was like there was a lot of There's a lot of complications
Yeah.
in that journey,
It is
and a lot of
complicated.
flaws.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I guess, Michael Scott in The Office. Kind of thinks that character thinks he's the best boss ever, but it's not for everybody. And I don't know what I mean, I don't know if anybody has the answer, but I think just acknowledging that someone else maybe isn't feeling that learning style is all you can do because it's so complicated, right? On one hand, everyone says, be confident, think you're the best, think you do the best job you can. And then it's like, wait, but this person doesn't think so. And so do you change everything for the one person? And, I just give teachers so much credit in general in this world because there's really,
They're the hero. I mean, like I especially during the pandemic, I was like
yeah,
elementary school teachers. I'm like, you are the
I know.
angels of this world.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it. I don't
No,
know how
my
you
wife
deal with
was,
like,
yeah, in the pandemic, my wife was an English middle school teacher, and I,
yeah,
I gave her my
woo,
self-tape backdrop so she could, we could separate a little bit in our apartment. And everyone was like, "What is your background? It looks like you're taking like a school photo." And I give her so much credit. And then even going back into the classroom, it's like you have some students on Zoom, some, and now there's a whole new generation that was affected by that time. And I think we gotta appreciate our teachers because they're the ones that kind of give us the foundation to go where we're going to go, you know? And maybe that's a tip for you all, but I would love if we could end this time together by you sharing a tangible kindness tip. So, do you have something you would like for listeners out there to do on their own corner of the world to try and make the world a little brighter?
I have a story about this. I
Yes.
I was thinking about it before coming on, and I, with my kid, I had to go pick up some medicine at a CVS. And it's like a kind of like rundown CVS, and you see everyone's like, they're in line to get medicine, like they're
Yeah.
not feeling their best. And there was a woman behind the counter, and she had the most beautiful hair. She just was like this, like extraordinary head of hair. And, I walked up, she's like, "Can I help you?" And I was like, your hair is so beautiful. And all of a sudden, what she was expecting is like, complaints about insurance or like, why am I waiting? And she just, something in her shifted and she was like, thank
Mm,
you. And then she got my thing. And as we were leaving, like the next person that came up, I just saw that she was like, hi, how are you doing today? And I was
mm,
like, look, that's a butterfly effect.
yeah.
I could have not said anything because I thought, like, to myself, I'm like, I think she's beautiful, but maybe she'll think I'm staring. But the fact that I was like, I'm gonna risk it. I'm just gonna tell her, like, you are really, like, you have
Yeah.
extraordinary hair, like, made her not only, like, be nice to me, she was, like, nicer to the next person, and that next person picking up their
Mm,
medicine will have, like, and I was like, that is actually the world. Like, we can change by small things. Like, when you were saying it's a risk to say hi to someone, it absolutely is. But sometimes it's like that risk that makes someone else kinda go like, "Oh, I'll do this to the next person." And it
yeah.
really was like, it seems like such a silly thing, but like, as I was leaving,
Mm,
I just saw, like, the chain effect of this CVS line of people picking up
yeah.
medicine different.
I love
They're like,
that.
"Okay,
I think that's such a beautiful example of kindness in action. And actually, we had the great Carol Burnett on here, and she told a
wow."
story. I know I did black out during that. She told an amazing story about going up to the makeup counter, and it was similar in that the cashier was extremely kind of like brusque and just mean to everybody. And Carol was like kind of indiscreet, and she just gave her a compliment, and it changed her whole vibe. And in a similar way, how she interacted with everybody. And you're so right. If we imagine if we all just did something like that, I mean, give someone a compliment, and even better if you can make it sort of different each time. I mean, if you want to walk around saying, I love your smile to everybody, that's also nice. But I think if you could challenge yourself every day to just do something like that, no matter where you go, I know it not only makes them feel good and other people after that, but it also makes you feel really good, right? You're sort of like, oh, I gave someone a compliment and they loved it. And there's something really beautiful about that full circle act of kindness.
It's like we think it, but often for whatever reason, like, we keep it to ourselves, and it's
Mm,
just like taking that extra step or risk to be like, put it out there.
yeah. And you could even start on social media. You could challenge yourself to comment 5 kind comments every day on someone's posts, and That stuff, it really does go a long way for people, similar to how you might forget something you said to somebody that they thought was negative and then it kind
Yeah,
of like affected them.
yeah,
It works the same way in a kind sense. So I love that you shared that. And I love that we got this time together. I just think you're
totally.
so special. And I'm so happy that you're getting all this attention because
Thank you.
we need more role models like you. So please don't lose this beautiful sauce that you have going on inside of you. I just think it's incredible. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for, I don't know, putting this in the world, like just like highlighting the necessity for it. I think it's so speaks to what we need in the moment.
Oh, thank you. And
Yeah.
while we talk the talk on here, I encourage everybody out there to go walk the walk, give someone a compliment, okay? Until next time, remember, everything is going to be A-OK.